We're honored to have one of our nation's foremost leaders in business. Craig, you're a Harvard grad, you're an MIT grad. So how did you get into the business entrepreneur perspective?
First and foremost, let's set the record clear. I'm carrying your luggage. This is an icon, a legend, a role model for me. And so it is my honor to be able to sit here and have a conversation with you. So thank you for having me.
I believe in success stories. And I don't think the media covers enough about these journeys that really make a difference in the lives of people.
Listen, I think it's so important that, our young brothers and sisters growing up know that there's so many ways in which, you can lean into your strengths, make a difference, have a life that's fulfilling. And for me, that was business. And like you said, we didn't really grow up knowing what that meant. You were either an engineer, a doctor, a lawyer, or a civil rights leader, if you were so lucky. But it has been just really a blessing that over the time I've came to read books like Reginald Lewis's. Yes, absolutely. You begin to realize that, people like you and I, we can do great things on the business field. And in fact, many of the great strides in the civil rights movement, as you know, were financed and supported and made possible by...
Were there other entrepreneurs in your family?
Well, the interesting thing is you and I were just talking about before, my great-great-great-grandfather, George Washington Golson, was born in 1860, a slave in Doraville, Georgia. And many years later, would go on to have his own farm, start a church. And so, although that wasn't the case for everyone in my family, this idea of Black entrepreneurship, innovation, business leadership, this isn't a new thing. This isn't something that just started happening in the 80s and 90s. We've been doing this for as long as we've had the ability to have access to capital. We've been innovating whether or not we profited off our innovation or not. And so we've been entrepreneurs. We didn't have the luxury of working for corporations, as you know. And so in many ways, the inspiration may not have always been literal, but I think in my subconscious, I always knew that these things were possible. So, I went to MIT thinking I was going to be an engineer, and I came out and began to quickly realize that there was folks out there doing things on Wall Street and consulting firms, building businesses, leading businesses. And I thought that this was something that, could be a great path for me.
Well, it takes a lot of courage to sort of break out into some venues where there's not a lot of representation of persons of color.
And so still is the case.
I'm sure your great-great-great-grandfather would be very pleased to see what has happened generations later with your leadership. I wanted to ask you about the intersection of technology and business. Mm-hmm. Some people are fearful of AI, artificial intelligence. Some people are fearful of innovations in technology. But tell us from your informed perspective, how you see alignment between business opportunities and technological innovation.
Innovation and technology, for that matter, has always been a scary thing for the status quo. When, you were farming and with your mule and we have a plow or the cotton gin or whatever innovation at that time, computer processing, it always threatened to, if not disrupt, certainly change the way we lived and the way we worked. And so it always has the potential to be scary. The future is scary. Humans are horrible predictors of the future. We tend to assume the worst. But we've also just seen in every, kind of major innovation, shift, and transformation in our society that opportunities are created, life expectancies are extended. The average, standard of living, at least for some, this is definitely not the case for all, as we know. And oftentimes, innovation tends to be a net contributor to good. Now, the truth of the matter is, has the heart of the man changed? Has the human condition changed? Has what we tend to do with tools and innovation, does that lean towards doing something good or doing something harmful? I would argue that the heart of humanity has not changed as much as I'd love for it, even though our advances have continued to do amazing things, and I'm sure will. Today, people are having really robust debates around AI.
Yes.
And what is the role of AI? It will disrupt many jobs. It will replace jobs. It will create jobs. But ultimately, I think the fear is, how will this encroach upon civil liberties? How will this encroach upon my privacy? How will this ultimately, if you're a fan of sci-fi like I am, are we going to be fighting robots in the field one day and hiding in caves? People have these fears. And the truth of the matter is, we just do not know. I think it really is up to our public institutions to make sure that we've got great governance, that we're being thoughtful, we're being intentional about the applications, who controls it. At this point, this is a little bit of game theory and prisoner's dilemma in the sense of you have other nation states that are also working to develop this technology. And so in as much as we want to slow down, to be really rational and thoughtful, and I think we should, at the same time, there's also this sense of urgency to make sure that we really are in the driver's seat and really at the table as architects of the innovation of the next generation.
What advice would you have to young people today who may be considering getting into a pathway toward business ownership, business development, but also may choose the path of technology innovation?
There's perhaps never been a better chance to really not only be a participant, get in the game, play the game, win the game, but to change the game in the area of business and technology. Why do I say that? The incumbents, the institutions, those who have for hundreds of years been the dominant players, who've set the rules in the game, are being disrupted. I work in the commercial real estate industry and have for a number of years, and we have just overnight seen the way people consume goods and services online decimate retail owners and retail values. We have seen just overnight, post-pandemic, people who've owned office buildings and families who've owned office buildings and people who set the rules that made those office buildings really valuable.
There's something called the future of work.
The future of work, which is still evolving. And so with so much disruption around how we're consuming goods and services and products, the table is wobbling now. And that's a really good opportunity to come in and, reset it in a way that works for the next generation. Meaning being, having gray hair, being of one color, being of one gender has really benefited many of the players in prior games. But this next game coming up, it's really going to favor people who are really quick to adopt and adapt, embrace, innovate, take risk. And I think our young people who are growing up with a mind to do that more so than perhaps me, maybe you, but certainly me, they have an opportunity to be not only players, but I think winners and game changers in this next season of business and innovation. There is no incumbent.
Because of your real estate background and other business prowess, you serve on a number of boards.
I do.
Tell us how important it is to have persons of color on major corporate boards.
Listen, there is so much research that, academics and other fact-based institutions have done to show that whenever organizations have diverse leadership, diverse, compositions and diverse governance, and think about the board is really about anticipating risk. It's about seeing over the horizon, and your ability to see over the horizon and anticipate different risks and understand different, kind of markets and communities really requires you to have, kind of eyes and ears and sensitivities to that. And if your board is of only one community, you are strategically going to blindside your company to the big opportunities and the big risk. But we also know that just organizations that are diverse perform better. They outperform their peer groups. And so this is just good kind of economic sense. But, listen, a few summers ago, after George Floyd was murdered,
yes,
there was a rally, and rightfully so, to see.
All of a sudden, there was a priority on diversity, equity, and inclusion.
All of a sudden.
There
have been many people of color for many years who were board ready and had the ability to serve on board. But it's a very murky, difficult process. How do you find yourself on the board, which for your audience is the group of people who are the CEO of a company reports into? They are ultimately responsible for the shareholders that, invest in that company. So this is the top of the company. How do you find yourself as a person of color into those rooms to even be considered? It's difficult. But I'll tell you, that summer, there was a lot of pressure on corporations to kind of go out and say, okay, we get it. We need to diversify our boards. We need to diversify our C-suites. We need to diversify our organizations. They tend to be more diverse at the bottom, but as you move up the top of the pyramid, it becomes less diverse. And people felt the pressure. But, unfortunately, it was a moment and not a movement. There was a lot of fanfare, a lot of energy around doing that. And I think a lot of us who've been board ready feel like, there hasn't been that ongoing kind of persistence. My sense is, there are some things now that are going to renew and reignite some of that interest. I mean, some of the things we're seeing in ESG, some of the companies who, their bankers are saying, we're not going to even take you public unless you have diversity on your board. Some states you can't. So listen, I think people, consumers, customers, investors, they want to see that a company is thinking more broadly about their stakeholders, not just your shareholders. And if they're doing that, they're going to diversify their boards, their C-suites, gender, ethnicity, beliefs, values, and experiences.
Yeah, I think a lot of business leaders I know now would say that diversity is good for business.
Yep.
It's just not good for charity. It's good for business.
It's good for business.
And our nation is much more diverse now than 60, 50, 30, even 20 years ago. So it seems to me there should be more opportunities today than less.
But you and I have an abundance mindset. We assume that the pie is growing. And we are participants in that, and we are, enabling that, inducing that, and everyone's a net benefit of that. But there's some people who have a scarcity mindset, and they are fearful that they're looking over and seeing some part of the pie growing for someone else and assuming it's coming at the cost and expense of theirs. Here in Georgia, we saw voter suppression, laws and tactics. They were enacted just after we saw people like Stacey Abrams and others almost rise to the chair of governor. Yes. And this is a state that, President Biden won, easily. And yet, even with so much progress, we saw, kind of these, opposite but equal, if not actually more than equal reactions to that. And we are forced much progress. The fight continues. It's one of the reasons why, a number of us started an organization called the Leadership Now Project, which is, kind of a rallying cry, a creation of safe space for business leaders to get involved in a way that's thoughtful. But we have ideas, we lead organizations, we have influence, we have voices, we have platforms. And a number of Harvard Business School alumni initially came together and said, let's do something. Let's start to do things to, promote democracy, protect democracy, and in many cases restore it using our business platforms, not in a way that was outside of the boundaries of business, but in a way that we thought was beyond just writing a check. And since then, we've grown to have over 300 members of business leaders. We've done many impressive things. We recently wrote an amicus brief in the Disney DeSantis case in Florida. We're saying, hey, this is scary and this is a red flag. We need to be careful as business leaders that this is not just a political instability, political retribution is something that's going to undermine our business environment. It's going to undermine our capitalism. It's going to undermine your ability to lead and run a thriving business. Voter suppression in Georgia, Ed Bastian, the CEO of Delta, he was right to come out and say that this is not good. This is not good for the people who fly my planes. It's not good for the people who load baggages on our planes. And we, Delta, have a responsibility to say something.
Well, it's a great news story, great development story, great resilience, and Craig, generations of Black excellence, generations of making a difference. Thank you for joining the Chavis Chronicles.
No, thank you for your leadership, your service, for being an example to people like me. It's been an honor.
For more information about the Chavis Chronicles and our guests, please visit our website at thechavischronicles.com. Also, follow us on Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. Major funding for the Chavis Chronicles is provided by the following. At Wells Fargo, diverse representation and perspectives, equity, and inclusion is critical to meeting the needs of our colleagues, customers, and communities. We are focused on our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, both inside our company and in the communities where we live and work. Together, we want to make a tangible difference in people's lives and in our communities. Wells Fargo, the bank of doing. American Petroleum Institute. Through API's Energy Excellence Program, our members are committed to accelerating safety, environmental, and sustainability progress throughout the natural gas and oil industry around the world. Learn more at api.org/API Energy Excellence. Reynolds American, dedicated to building a better tomorrow for our employees and communities. Reynolds stands against racism and discrimination in all forms and is committed to building a more diverse and inclusive workplace. At AARP, We are committed to ensuring your money, health, and happiness live as long as you do.